We did almost $400,000 in revenue in 1 month. My heart was beating out of my chest. I was sweating, and I'm like, oh my God, what's wrong with me? I started with $5,000. I had grown that to almost $300,000 in my bank. I lost almost every bit of that. I was down to less than 50K. When somebody brings you truth or constructive feedback, if your first thought is, let me find fault in the person who's bringing me this information, you will never. Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of As the Leader Grows. Sitting in my podcast studio, I have been up since about 2:47 this morning. Yes, 2:47. Drinking pre-workout, about to go hop on my Peloton. I've been going already for about 3 hours. I wanted to share with you guys, and I don't know if I'm going to title this the feedback loop, growth mindset, but I wanted to share with you today, and I wanted to pose this thought to you. If your first thought when someone brings you feedback or constructive criticism is to look for faults in the person that is bringing you this information, then you will never achieve your full potential. And guys, I see this happen far too often. I see this happen way more than it should. When you try to bring someone feedback, especially someone you're close to, and you try to bring someone feedback, now, obviously this is going to be in a relationship or at a moment to where it's usually unsolicited. And I want to take you back to a story in my life. We'll go back to last July at our Create Conference. The Create Conference at the beginning of that year in 2023, we knocked it out of the park. It was the best month. We did almost $400,000 in revenue in 1 month. We did I think we did $384K in revenue that month. And at Create, we did over $200,000 in revenue. And the event was, I can't even begin to tell you what an unbelievable success it was. Friends like John Maxwell, Ed Milet, Gary Brecka, Vic Keller, Brent Gove, Marie Cosgrove, just some amazing, amazing friends. 3-day event, absolutely crushed it. We got done with the event, and a couple of my buddies were like, dude, you need to do this again this year. Like, you need to do 2 of these, one here and find another spot around the country. Well, again, I'm a risk taker. And business and what we do in the entrepreneurial world really is all about taking risk, right? It's 100% about taking risk. And so I said, we're going to do another one of these in July, 6 months later in Dallas, Texas. Well, I lost about $150,000 to $160,000 on that event. I got absolutely crushed. So let me give you, and I'm going to give you some numbers so you know how dramatic it was. The first year at Create, I think our sales were like 180,000. Second year at Create, our sales were 250-ish. The next time we tried to do a Create conference in Dallas, and I had 160 some odd people in the room, so there's a lot of people in the room. Our sales that weekend for Create were $400. Now wrap your head around that. We went from mid 100s, I think it was 180 the first year, 250 to 260 just at the conference the second year, and almost $400K in revenue for the month to $400. We sold 2 half-price general admission tickets to the next Create conference. Devastated. I can't begin to. As a matter of fact, let me tell you how devastated I was. I woke up that morning around 5 o'clock, 4:30, 5 o'clock a.m. Central Time. I was in my hotel in Dallas. My heart was beating out of my chest. So I was sweating like profuse. Like I literally had just walked out of the gym or got off my Peloton. And I'm like, oh my God, what's wrong with me? And I picked my phone up and I text my group chat. Gary Brecka, Brent Gove, Vic Keller, Brian Covey, Randy Garn. I text my 5 guys. I said, guys, this is what's going on. I have no idea what's happening with me. I didn't know if I was having a heart attack. I had no idea. I knew the stress level was huge because I knew that I had just gotten crushed financially over the weekend. Forward facing, conference was amazing. Brendan Burchard, Erwin McManus, Gary, me, we crushed it, knocked it out of the park. The problem was I got out over my skis and I tried to do another event, and the people that were, again, event's great, but everybody that was at the event were people that were already involved in what we were doing. So there was not really an opportunity to be able to generate revenue. Shoot that text out to my guys. Gary Breck is the first, he's up. Because Gary's kind of like I am. He's kind of crazy like that as far as getting up early in the morning. Gary texts me back. He goes, Ken, it's going to be okay. You're having a panic attack. It never happened to me before. Had no idea what was going on. He goes, here's what you need to do. And he gave me some breathing exercises. And he said, go take a cool shower. Here's your breathing exercises to do in the shower. You're going to be okay. So I do that, and it took me about 30 minutes to calm down. And when I did, when I got my nervous system regulated, because listen, I've done a lot of somatic therapy, so I understand what it's like to do somatic therapy. I could not get my nervous system regulated. I was terrified. And so I did the breathing work, hopped in the shower, took a cool shower, was texting the guys, hey guys, I'm okay. I laid back down in the bed and went to sleep. I think I slept for about 2.5 hours before I got my first text. I think Vic was the first one that texted me to check on me. And I'll never forget getting up and then having to face the day. Like, holy cow, how did I make the decision to do this and literally crushed. So I want to fast forward a few hours in that day. I leave to drive back to Birmingham. I'm in my car. I got about 9 hours. And I had texted Vic earlier that day, and I said, dude, I need some time. I need some feedback. I want to have a conversation. I got in the car. I was just pulling outside. I was just getting out of Dallas, headed towards Birmingham, because I was still in Birmingham at the time. And I got on the phone with Vic, and we spent an hour and 15 minutes on that call, about an hour and a half break because he had something to do, and then another hour and 15 minutes after that. So about 2.5 hours of the 9-hour trip, I was on the phone with Vic. But here's what I want you to catch, because this is huge. Again, if your first thought when somebody brings you truth or constructive feedback, if your first thought is, let me find fault in the person who's bringing me this information, you will never reach your full potential. I'm telling you, it's impossible for you to reach your full potential if that's your attitude and if that's your mindset. And it also is a barometer and shows you that you really, truly do not have a growth mindset. And I'm telling you guys, I'm on the phone with Vic, and I said, dude, I need your feedback. The first question he asked me was this. He said, Ken, do you want my feedback or do you want my honest feedback? I had a decision to make. And guys, I'm going to be really honest with you. I could not have been more raw in where I was at that moment. You want to talk about raw. I had just 4 or 5 hours earlier had a panic attack. I had literally watched what I had built in my company over 2.5 years from zero. I started with $5,000. I had grown that to almost $300,000 in my bank. I lost almost every bit of that. I was down to less than 50K. I was decimated. I can't tell you what a difficult day that was. I get on the phone with him and he asked me that question. I had a decision right there in the car, as raw as it was. Literally, it was so painful to be on that phone call with Vic that day. And when he said, do you want feedback or do you want my honest feedback? Here was my answer. I said, Vic, I can't get better unless you give me your honest feedback. And I'll never forget the next 40 minutes of that hour and 15-minute first call we had. The very first thing Vic said to me was, dude, I love you. He goes, you are doing things. Vic said, dude, I love you. You're doing things that very few people on the planet are doing. I love your heart. I love who you are as a man. But you do not have enough people in your life who will tell you when things aren't like they should be. He goes, you have too many people around you that tell you how amazing you are. You have too many people around you that tell you how awesome you are. And now I'm sitting here. Now I had just lost all this money, had got, again, forward facing, conference was great. Everybody loved it. Everybody thought it was amazing. Tons of relationships, fantastic. Backside behind the curtain, the view nobody else gets, I'm having a panic attack at 4:35 a.m. in the morning. Now I'm having to drive for 9 hours and process through what happened. Everybody goes, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur. Do you know how many times I hear people say, I want to do live events? I'm like, no, you don't. You have no idea. You have no idea what it's like to try to pull off what we pull off 2 or 3 times a year. So there are times, guys, there are times where I'm like, what in the world am I doing? I don't have to do this, but I feel called to do this. And that calling that I have, that purpose, that passion that I have in my heart is what allows me and what allows you to sit there when you have someone that you know cares for you and goes, do you want feedback or do you want my honest feedback? And then as raw as your heart and your mind may be, Vic, I can't get better unless you give me honest feedback. And I'll never forget that first 40 minutes of that hour and 15-minute phone call. About every 3 to 4 minutes, Vic would check in with me. He'd go, buddy, are you doing all right? And I'm driving down the road and I'm like, this is exactly what, I think so. I think I'm okay. And he would just give me honest feedback, like hard feedback. And I'm listening to this. And you're like, and some of the people watching this video, guys, let me go back to one of the most pivotal moments in my ministry when I did student ministry. I grew one of the largest, most well-known student ministries in America here in the Atlanta area. We did, myself, my good friend Tony Elrod, who was a youth pastor for my good friend Jensen Franklin at Free Chapel, and a bunch of other student pastors in the area, like all different denominations. We got together, said we want to do an event in Gainesville. So we did one called One Day, I think it was what it's called. And we did this at a facility in Gainesville called the Mountain Center. We had about 1,100 students show up to this back to school rally for all the youth groups in the city. So we're doing this event, and we finally agreed on a speaker to come in, Ron Luce, who was a mentor and a friend of mine. And I said, listen, let's get Ron. Everybody's like, yes, we can agree, because we couldn't theologically agree on who we wanted to speak. No, he's too Baptist. No, he's Pentecostal. Anyway, you know how the church world goes. So Ron comes in. I'm emceeing the event. I've got my good friends from Nashville, Revelation Underground. They're in doing worship and leading. And there's 1,100 kids in this huge auditorium. We're having a blast. I'm emceeing. I watch Ron walk in the door with Tony. And I'm on stage. And I watch him walk in the door. And I watch him walk up the steps. And I watch him sit in the camera well. And I know Ron. And I watch him. He's just observing everything that's going on. And we went to Chili's that night. Tony and I took Ron to Chili's after the event was over, which is, if you've ever been a student pastor, Chili's is the place to go, or Applebee's, because it was cheap back in the day. So we're sitting there, and I'll never forget, the server comes over and he takes our order. And I said, dude, do you have a pen and a paper? He goes, I got a napkin and I've got a pen. So I had my pen and my napkin out there, and I asked Ron this question. I said, he was talking about, hey, you guys did great. It was fantastic. This was awesome. I said, great, Ron, what could we have done better? And this is what he said. He said, Ken, you guys did an amazing job. I said, Ron, I know we did good. It was a week. It was the first event we've ever done at this size, 1,000 kids. I know we knocked it out of the park. What could we have done better? And Ron looked at me. He goes, Ken, dude, you crushed it. Like, it was really, really, it was done well. This is what I told him. It's guys, listen, I'm telling you, feedback. It's one of my core values. I'm not only open to feedback, but I actively pursue feedback. If you don't have a feedback loop in your life and people who will speak truth into your life, you will never live to your full potential. I looked at Ron sitting across the table. I said, Ron, I've been listening to this is cassettes back in the day, because we're talking about 1998, 99-ish. I said, Ron, I've been listening to your leadership cassettes for about 2 years now. I watched you walk in the building. I watched you walk up the stairs and sit in that camera well with Tony. And I watched you observe everything that was going on. Ron, I know we did a great job. I know we knocked it out of the park. But how can we get better? And guys, for 10 minutes, he gave me one thing right after another. One thing right after another. The very first thing he said, because I noticed it at the thing too, he goes, the projector on the screen was crooked. It wasn't square. And that was one of the very first things I saw because I'm a little OCD. But he just kept going and going. He just giving me all this feedback, all these, and they were small things, but they were things of excellence. And that conversation with Ron, had I not had that conversation with him, it opened the door for him to become my mentor. It opened the door for him to put me in rooms that I had never gotten in before. It opened the door for him to put me on stage behind John Maxwell in front of Jeannie, who was one of my mentors. It opened so many doors. Why? Because I wanted to get better. I know we did great. Same thing with Vic. I know the event was a success. Listen, Brendan Bouchard stood on stage, put his arm around me and said, guys, I've been doing this 15 years. I have never given anyone 2 days of my time outside of Ken. I know we did good, forward facing, great, but what could we have done better? Dude, I'm in that moment. It was one of the toughest days I've had in the past 25 years professionally. Not only did that happen, but I got a call that morning and found out that one of the guys who I thought was my best friend was a Ponzi schemer. He was fake. Everything he had wasn't even real. And so I'm processing through all these things. Do you want feedback or do you want honest feedback? Vic, I can't get better unless you give me honest feedback. Guys, if you want to reach your full potential, you are going to have to be open to. You can't be open to everybody, but you better be open to the right people. You better be actively pursuing feedback from the people who care about you, from the people who see the purpose and potential in you. Because listen, if somebody doesn't see the purpose and potential in you, it doesn't do you any good to go get feedback from that person. You need to get feedback from people who see your full potential. Like when they see on the inside of you what's going on and they see, man, this guy's got a call. This guy's got a purpose. This guy has got a dream and a vision that can literally leave impact and legacy around the world. And when you get around those kind of people, what happens is they begin to be specific with their feedback, and it can be a little more painful because they see the potential that's in your life. And so I spent an hour and 15 minutes on that first call with Vic. And for the first 35 to 40 minutes, it was rough feedback. And let me say, the feedback wouldn't have been so rough had it not been so raw and real and in the moment. But it was raw. And like I said, Vic was so gracious with me. He said about every 3-4 minutes, he would check in and go, buddy, you okay? Brother, you all right? I'm just listening. I'm like, I'm good. I think I'm good. I'm driving down the road about 90 miles an hour in my car, heading towards Birmingham, thinking, holy cow, what have I done? Like my mind's going a million miles an hour going, how did I build what I've built in 2.5 years just to watch it get decimated in 2.5 days? If someone brings you feedback, if someone offers you or brings you constructive feedback, even if it's constructive criticism, if somebody brings you some information and the first thought you have is to look for faults in that person, then I promise you, you'll never reach your full potential. So here's a question I want to ask you this morning. And this one's going to be quick. We're 18 minutes. I want to ask you this question. Are you not only open to feedback, but are you actively pursuing feedback? Feedback from the right people, the people who love you, the people who see the potential and the purpose on the inside of you, and the people who genuinely want to do life with you and walk through life with you and help you become the best version of yourselves. If you have those type of people in your life and you're open to the feedback, even when it sucks. Because I'm going to tell you guys, and you've heard the saying, embrace the suck. I think that's what my friend Ben Newman says, embrace the suck. Listen, it freaking sucked. It was one of the worst days professionally I've ever had. But guys, what God did in that 48 to 72 hour time frame shifted the way that I've done everything else since that day, and has put us in position to have greater impact, to have greater influence, and to be able to leave greater legacy. Guys, thanks for joining me on this episode of As the Leader Grows. I am your host, Kent Joslin. I cannot wait to see you next week. And number two, thank you for helping us become in the top 1.5 podcasts in the entire country. Blows my mind the number of people that download these episodes. If this is added value, I'm going to ask you to do 2 things. Number 1, subscribe and share. I love you guys. We'll see you next week on As the Leader Grows.